This is Journeys with the No Schedule Man with Kevin Bulmer, sharing the stories of heart-centered entrepreneurs and creative souls who have challenged themselves to find their real success and to live and work happy. Wherever you may be watching or listening, please follow along, share, and subscribe. And be sure to visit noscheduleman.com to learn more. We're glad you found us. Enjoy the show.
I've been known to struggle with reality. Not that it is any real mystery. I just don't have the time for the stupidity. And yet you see it everywhere.
Hey, it's Kevin. It's Journeys with the No Schedule Man. We've been away for a little while, but glad to be back and glad to have you here as well. And Rumina Morris is here. Rumina, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for making the time. How are you keeping in the midst of this crazy pandemic world that we're living in? How are you doing?
Probably the same as everyone else. I'm trying to make sense of what's happening. I'm trying to get grounded in all the mayhem. Trying to make sense of a lot of things. I think it's a real time for reckoning for the globe, but also for us as individuals. So I think, like everybody else, I've been trying to pause and figure next steps for myself and for the people around me. It's happening. Feels like it's a very heavy time, and so trying to find some comfort in that is kind of hard right now.
The pause is something that has been a part of my process ever since all of this began. And I find that I'm grasping for some sort of sense of forward movement and momentum, clarity, purpose. But I seem to keep getting brought back to a pause of some sort or another. What's that been like for you to try to navigate your way forward, but also stay in touch with yourself when there's really no familiar anymore? How are you finding that?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. I mean, for me, as much as a lot has changed, a lot hasn't changed. Um, I think all that's happening has just sort of brought things to the surface that were already there. And in my line of work, I've always been very attuned to what's really going on in our society. I've been, through my work as a social worker, obviously, I've been very connected with the marginalized people in our communities. And so I have a good sense of what's broken and what's not right. And so, I think for me, what's happening, I mean, Mother Earth has been screaming at us for some time in terms of our global crises, that have been happening leading up to the pandemic. I think the pandemic is just a wake up because we've not been paying attention. And so that coupled with, it's really brought to surface how broken the systems are. And then, of course, this summer with all of the attention on anti-Black racism, I think has sort of, there are two crises that have sort of collided and have timed themselves beautifully. Only by doing it this way could we really understand what's happening. So by the pandemic, showing us who is really who's on the outskirts of society and who is most vulnerable. And then with the anti-Black racism and Black Lives Matter movement, kind of reminding us that was always a situation that we were dealing with, coupled with this. Like there's so much at play: socioeconomic status, racism. There's so much coming to the surface of what's not right with our society. So in terms of hope and what keeps me grounded, it's all the things that are shifting because of it. This is a time for innovation. This is a time for pivoting, and people really, I mean, like yourself and myself, are really exploring what this moment means for us. What is our bigger purpose? And I think out of this, a lot of inward work and inner reflection is going to create sort of an outer change, outer outcomes. We'll have a different society, I think, by the time we're done with this. I don't think we have a choice. I think right now our backs are against the wall. So that brings me hope that there is work to be done, and it is time to do it. So
let's give some context for those who find this conversation who are not familiar with the kind of work that you do, Rumina, I thought that I would leave it for you to talk about how you found yourself into the kind of work that you do as an anti-racist coach, among other things. But maybe I can hand it off to you from there to just maybe describe it at this point in your journey, how you would describe yourself and the kind of work that you're doing.
I don't think I've really, I was thinking about this in terms of my journey to becoming an anti-racism coach. And really, I haven't really anywhere. It's always been who I am. I got a new fancy title. And by that, I mean, I'm a social worker by background. That has been very much about social justice and advocacy. So my career led me to social work. And very early on, I got into child welfare. And child welfare, of course, is a system that is, it's an interesting system because the social workers where you are, looking to sort of help and support and advocate for people, and yet you have this incredible amount of power. And power in a way that you can actually really harm, people and families and trajectories for generations by decisions that you make. And so, social work and child welfare is a difficult challenge when you are trying to connect with people and still have an incredible amount of power over their outcomes. And I got into leadership, and that's absolutely a leader. And I had an opportunity to really develop my leadership skills. And I think I had a unique opportunity where your leadership matters in a different way, again, because of the trickle-down effect. So as people are going and interacting with some way when they intersect with the child welfare system, the decisions that workers make in those moments are, obviously based on who they are and where they've come from. And so what we know today as our biases. And so I had a really interesting time sort of working through my own biases and trying to be an authentic leader, and at the same time um, helping people to sort of shift their own mindsets and to consider other possibilities, because the system is so oppressive and so racist. And so I did a lot of time in that system. I loved it. It was such a learning opportunity for me. And it sort of led me to, when I was in that system, I recognized that, and I learned that there was a disproportionate number of Black and Indigenous children in the state society. There continues to be. And that's not by accident, right? Because children don't just fall into our laps, into the children's aid. We actually go out and we investigate and we make assessments and make decisions, and we assess risk, and then we make decisions based on that. And all of those decisions can only be made by people, and people have implicit biases. And so if they're unaware of them and those biases are at play, then those children and those families end up being harmed. So it's not a one person thing, it's a systemic thing, but the system is made of people. And so I really started to pay attention to anti-oppressive practice within that system. So really tried to focus, trying to have conversations about how our biases are playing out and how we can do things differently so that we are less harmful to families, particularly given the history of child welfare in Canada, particularly. Our history with Indigenous peoples is just horrific. And for those of you who don't know, there are more Indigenous children in care right now in the system than there were during the 60s scoop, which is saying a lot. It's speaking to how decisions are made. Again, they're made by people with a system that supports biases. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And in the time that I was trying to move anti-oppressive practice forward, it wasn't as trendy as it is right now, I would say. And so, there was a lot of resistance, and understandably, because for many, the system wasn't broken. And so now I've landed in a place where, rather than working within a system and trying to affect change from the inside, as I thought I really, was made to do, I'm I'm tapping into people today in the moment that we're in. I'm tapping into people who are wanting to do things differently, are excited about doing things differently, recognize that they have a responsibility to consider how their own biases are at play, particularly as leaders in organizations. And so when I say that I'm an anti-racism coach, what I'm doing is working with people individually or as groups, as like a senior leadership team, to unpack some of the biases that they may have within their organization and in their leadership styles. And so for me, it's a real gap. There's a lot of information out there post George Floyd's murder around how to support your employees who are racialized, particularly Black employees right now, and how to offer them space, offer them time off to check in with them. You know, all these great things, provide resources and supports for the people that are struggling in the light of the pandemic, and then on top of that, dealing with the struggle and the burden of being Black. As it was already hard enough, but when people are aware of it, it seems to sort of raise the pressure a little bit. But the thing is that, you know, racialized people are saying it's not our work to tell you how to do this. It is not our responsibility to inform you how white supremacy is at play. And so there's a disconnect, because if we're asking people who are in leadership, who are generally white, male, cisgendered, when we are asking them to do work that they don't even understand how they're part of the problem, I think there's a lot of risk in that. I think it's not really fair. And the conversations I have with people, particularly over the last few months as I've started to do this work, the conversations I have with people are that they want to do better and they know that they need to do things differently, but they don't know how, because there's such a connection between who we are as people and who we are as employees or employers. You know, I think for a long time we've sort of separated that. And there's something to, you know, if you have biases or if you live in a certain realm of society and you don't expose yourself or don't have exposure to other realms, how can you be expected to know what it is like if you don't have those connections? And so my hope is to sort of bridge some of that with people who are genuinely curious to do better, legitimately don't know, and need to bridge that for them.
Let's go back a little bit into the story, if you will, Rumina. And I wonder if you could give us a little bit of context and what brought you to this path. What made you so passionate about exploring something that is really so vast and as you noted and touched on in multiple ways, a challenge that's almost too big to get your hands around. I mean, where's even the start of the circle to approach this? What was it that shaped your journey in such a way that you felt that it was your calling to pursue this path? Looks like we've got a little bit of an
In
audio
terms of my
challenge with
that's a great
Rumina. I
question.
can
I
see
think
her answering, but
now,
I
as
can't.
I'm
Oh,
so
there
much
she-
older, in terms of how and why did I even get here? And I don't really know the answer. And to be fair, I mean, obviously, it's my lived experience. Oh, can you hear me?
I can. We seem, for whatever reason, we have a wicked delay between between us.
Okay, can you,
So we'll
Kevin?
just have to try to be patient with that. Yeah, I can. So I'm going to step out of the way and let you continue with what you were saying.
I know, I know. Yeah. So in terms of my journey and how I got, say, probably a multitude of things. Um, and obviously my lived experience is part of that. When I grew up as a young child, I grew up in England. But I grew up in Cambridge, which is a very white, wealthy city, and political refugees in that country, and in that city there was not a lot of racialized people, and so in my school it was myself and my siblings. I mean, we didn't have a lot of diversity. I shouldn't say that it was overly white. We had a lot of diverse people where we lived, but definitely in school it was an obvious, a lot of mocking and a lot of racial kind of bullying, and that sort of set the tone for me in terms of different and othered. And then I moved here when I was 13 to Canada, and I moved to Brampton, which has become a diverse city. And so growing up in Brampton, I found a lot of my power, if you will, in terms of being racialized. I wasn't the only racialized person in my school by any means. And I began to sort of pay attention to the things that were going on. I watched a lot of my friends who were coming in from different countries. For example, I had moved from England, and when I got here, I was put ahead of my age. So I should have got 8. I went into grade. I was only 12, turning 13. And it was because I spoke the Queen's English, and because I was coming from the UK, my education to be advanced. My siblings were all advanced. But what I noticed when I was in the things that I sort of, things like my colleagues who came from different countries, or from Jamaica, where they were former colonized countries, so they had the same British education system that I had come from. But because they had an accent, or because they sounded different, or had a dialect of English, they were not only not put ahead, but were held back because of their language or because of their accents. Same education system, same situation, and a lot of them were also, and many people my age will recall, were put into, and it still happens, were put into the general sort of course of high school, so that they could end up going to university. New immigrants don't know how the system works here. I certainly didn't understand it. But because I was from England, I was given, this is interesting because I'm racialized, but I had the privilege of coming as an immigrant from a predominantly white country. And so I got to play and take advantage of those privileges in a really weird way, even though I was racialized. And so I saw other people in very similar situations, and I realized how their trajectories were completely different than mine, just by virtue of the guidance counselor who decided where they should go, or by the principal who decided where their education, would fit best. And so I just was very, very attuned to this kind of stuff, and I started to pay attention. I was an avid, as most teenagers are, I listened to a lot of music, and the music that I was influenced by, the great Bob Marley. I listened to a lot of reggae music that was very roots and very conscious and very political and very, anti-system, and very acknowledging how the system is rigged against people of color. In my 20s, I listened to a lot of new age alternative music, very similar in terms of a lot of political kind of statements, and a lot of speaking up against poverty and about the systems that are keeping people marginalized. So I was just always very in tune with this kind of thing, which led me to get into social work, which led me to get into working with vulnerable families and children. So that's always been sort of core to who I am. And I found that when I was working within the social work field as a racialized person, I tried to wear both pieces to my identity, being a social worker and being, a child welfare worker, being a manager, but also being a racialized person, and nuances that come with that, and trying to share that with people. That's why I say I think I've always been an anti-racism coach, because I've always been speaking and connecting with people on this topic, because it matters not just to me, but it matters for me and for people that look like me, and for people that actually don't look like me, and for all the people that have invisible differences. And so I think that's sort of been core to who I am all along. It's just that in the way that it's played out, I've tried to do both. And I think today, as I said, through the pandemic and through the reflection, I've been able to sort of land in saying, I don't want to force myself to fit into this sort of work. I want people work itself, the vessel to help change for me to sort of get to where I am today.
Rumina, I think at this point, what I'd like to try to do is to see if we can get you to reconnect, because I don't know what what the experience is like for those who are watching and listening, but we've got such a delay between us that I'm finding it challenging to hear all of what you're saying, and I want to make sure that that people can hear and see you okay. So I'm going to disconnect you, and then I'm going to ask you to sign right back in, just to see if we can get a better connection for the rest of our conversation. So I'm going to stay right here. And if you're here watching and listening to Rumina, don't go anywhere, because she's going to be right back. As you may be noticing, there's obviously we don't have a strong connection. And there has been a delay on Rumina's end where you could probably perceive, or maybe I'm having a different experience where there'd be about a 5 or 6 second or 10-second delay from the time I finished speaking to where that gets to her. And it was really breaking up to where I found it difficult to hear all of what she was saying. So we'll get her to sign back in, and we'll have her with you here again in just a couple of moments. Yep, she's just coming back right now, and hopefully we get a bit better of a connection so that we can make the conversation smooth for you. And thanks again for joining us. Rumina and I were going to be working together on an event. I run an inspirational event series here in London, Ontario, Canada, called Mo Mondays London. And we had our November event scheduled for the 16th of this month. And Rumina and I were going to be working together to have her on stage for that event. And unfortunately, the pandemic has had other ideas with COVID cases rising. And anyway, this gives us a chance to connect this way. Let's see if this is any better. Thank you for sticking with us, and Rumina, thank you for doing that. Let's hope it's a little bit smoother and less delay. I'm curious if there, like, was it a fairly straight trajectory for you of wanting to get into social work and ultimately the work that you're doing now? Or did you have other things that you maybe strongly considered, but you just found you got pulled back to this path?
No, I think they're one and the same. I actually don't see them as different. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that the authenticity piece has sort of landed for me now. I don't think they're different. I think I've always, social work is about what? It's about people. It's about connecting with people. It's about helping people. It's about lifting people up. It's about working with the people that are having, the hardest time in society. So turns out those people are also, racialized people. It's also those who have disabilities. It's also those who are, transgendered. It's also those who are homeless, and it's also seniors. And so the vulnerable are, it's all one and the same. And so, anti-racism coach is the language of the moment. It's all about humanity. It's all about inclusion. It's all about being good, kind, and taking care of vulnerable people. And that's just work. That is social work. And so I see them as the same. I actually don't see them as any different. I think my purpose has just changed. I think that my opportunity to sort of to do this work within my own right, and to do it, where I can stretch and do it in a way that is in keeping with who I am versus what I'm told to do. This work is, there's a lot of people doing it right now, and it's really good, but this is not welcome work for very, very long time, right? Like, this has been pushed down people's agendas in their workplaces. This has not been always welcome, and even when it's felt like it was welcome, not so much amongst leaders. More so, there are people who have had like diversity and inclusion specialist kind of positions where that is their job in the organization. Well, those people tend to, become quite disliked in the organization. They become, it becomes only their job, and others sort of take a back seat. Things have kind of gone off the rails in this work for a long time. So I think for me, trying to do it within the context of other people's agendas doesn't work. I'm looking to, so for me, it's really about being genuine to love. Social work is about connection. It's about people. It's about, and leadership is about connection, and it's about engagement and having people feel like they belong and like they're included and like they feel they have some psychological safety. Those are all the things that are important for any relationship, whether you're a parent and a child, whether you're a manager and an employee, whether you're in a romantic relationship. These are all the things that we need to just be good people. So I see it as one and the same. I just see it as an opportunity to tap into the people that are just, their blinders are on for good reason, because they haven't had to know any different. And it's sort of time to go, okay, it's your turn. It's your turn to do a little bit of work and a little bit of reflection. People are very scared. People are scared to give up their privilege. People are scared to, what does this mean if I unpack? People feel very, shaken up. And for me, it's like, let's just figure it out. Let's just stop avoiding it, stop ignoring it, stop pretending it's not there. A lot of the work over the years has been about creating awareness. Did you know that there's diversity? Did you know that awareness is like, it's over. Today, if you don't know, if you're not aware, I don't know where you've been this year. So awareness is not sort of the name of the game anymore. Right now, it's about, what do you have to do? What do I have to do? And I think the big reckoning that I've had over this last few months, as someone who does this work and has always done this work, the big thing that I've learned is that I now, and as the title says, I now have landed in acknowledging that I am a racist, anti-racist. There's no denying it. There's no hiding it. Anti-Black racism lives within me. It's how I was brought up. It's how I was raised. It's how my community speaks. We're all unpacking that. This is not just white people's work. This is everyone's work. Black people are doing their work in terms of reconciling with all of the things that they felt for years, and looking around going, wait, you and you, like, we've all been experiencing this and haven't, everyone is sort of figuring this out. But for me, the work is all of ours to do. So enough of the awareness stuff. Let's just figure it out and acknowledge that we're part of the problem. All of us, every single one of us. If we live in this system, if I work in this system, then I'm part of the problem for sure. And that means that I can be part of the solution, right?
How do you manage to cultivate your positivity and maintain your optimism in the face of such a broad challenge?
Can I be hokey, kids? I mean, the future. Like, I was just having a conversation earlier today about how our generation, my generation, is such a disappointment. We've just let ourselves down. We've let our future generations down. So we need to clean up, and we need to do work for them. So that's how I stay positive. I mean, it's I don't even think I'm positive. I'm just real. Like, I don't deny anything, and I don't feel shame about it. I just acknowledge it and bring it to the surface so that I'm aware of it all the time. And for me, it gets very complicated in my world, because I have defined myself as someone who does this work and who is an anti-racist, and now I'm struggling with having to say that I'm a racist, anti-racist. Like, it sucks. I talk about this a little bit, particularly as of late, because of my own reckoning. It never used to matter as much, but my husband is Black and my children are obviously mixed race. And I think I'm really having a hard time understanding what that really means. I think I've always been in this naive sort of place of, they will have such a strong identity of their mother and their father, and they will be both and today, as I understand what it means to be Black and what it means to be identified as Black, things change. This is my kids are, as much as I want them to be both and, they're not. They are, when they walk out the door, their South Asian mom on their face, when the teacher police them, they're going to be considered Black. So starting to try and understand that, knowing that I have no idea what that means, and I'm trying to understand that in my own home. And that's why I kind of go to the, like, I just want to encourage people to think, like, if I'm struggling and this is my life's passion, and my children and my husband are Black, and I'm how I am so much part of how much anti-Black racism is played out in my mind, because I've been so I've been so focused on how racism has played out in my life as a South Asian person. The whole, the idea of, light skin and is better, and, all these sort of white supremacist ideas, these values of Eurocentric values that are the ideal. These are the things I've always grappled with and been very vocal and very angry about, if you will. And I'm sort of humble now, going, hold on a second. Yeah, you've experienced racism, but you also have a whole lot of privilege. Remember how you got ahead 1 year in school? That changed my outcome. That meant I got to go to university. That meant I got to do what I wanted to do, plus other things, right? Other privileges and that come with being not Black. I'm reckoning myself with all of this, and then wrapping my head around. But then that means things are there. There's a different experience for my children, even though I'm fighting so hard. So my positivity is sort of just reality. Like, there's work to do, and who's with me? Who? Let's do this, because there are so many people that I'm getting so excited about that I'm meeting who are, yes, I don't know what I don't know, and I want someone to sort of guide me on that, or I want my workplace to be living and breathing inclusion, not just the policy and the written stuff, but actually demonstrating it in our values and how we get people in, how we keep people, how we have a succession plan for them, how we grow people, how we mentor people that don't necessarily look like the status quo. So that's my hope. I'm probably never more positive than right now for all of those reasons.
You mentioned a word that had been on my mind as you were forming your last response, and that was naive. And I'm wondering, from your perspective and experience, Rumina, where naivety fits in as I'm searching for the right word, an adversary, a challenge in this. So, for instance, I'll use myself as a bit of a guinea pig. I think I'm guilty, if that's the right word, of being very naive. To the point where I'm 46 now, but really being awakened to what the experience has been like or for so many people that I observe, or that have maybe been part of my life or work, that I can't. I'm so naive at even seeing that in some cases that there are such clear problems out there, because I don't see the world that way, and then maybe in indirectly contributing to the lack of conversation, change, leadership in terms of understanding about privilege, and again, I think born of that naivety. Not that it's necessarily evil, but it's part of the equation, isn't it? And I wonder how much that factors into, say, when you go into an organization, to help people to see this is something we need to take ownership of proactively, where you may have some people like me who don't initially don't even see that role is there for them to take.
Absolutely. The privilege of privilege. No, okay. So it doesn't end there, though, because people have been claiming that things are not right from the beginning of time. I don't remember a time where there hasn't been protests. Okay, I'm 46, you're 46. Rodney King, we were there. We remember it was. So this is not new. This is before us. This is generation. Listen, from the minute slaves were brought over to this land, they were fighting and dying to live. Nothing's changed. So yes, that is part of the problem is the privilege of not knowing, but it's a bit of a choice, right? I mean, there's two different, we're living in two different bubbles. Some of us, like some of us have completely different lived experiences. So, but the other piece to that is as I'm realizing, and have been realizing longer than I think some people, is that there's a flip to that, because I didn't know that you have privileges that I don't. For example, right? I mean, one of the easy things that I often will talk about is, women walking alone at night, it's a very common fear response to be a little bit leery of your surroundings, right? You just get a little, in a parking garage, you're a little bit unnerved. And most men don't have to do that. Okay, most. But as a man, you don't know that I'm doing that. And as a woman, I actually didn't even realize that there's an option to not do that, because I only, right? So, or you're unaware and naive to the fact that as a woman, I might be feeling a bit unsafe. I too am naive and unaware that there is an option to not feel this way, because it's all I've known. So there's two things happening, right? So because we can only know what we know within our lived experience, I also am recognizing that a big part of why I am so in touch with other people and other ways of living is partly because of the work that I've done, is partly because I've been in so many people's homes that I recognize other people don't have that privilege, right? Like, it's an honor to go into people's homes, whether I'm invited or not as a children's aid worker. But I've been and I've seen and I see how other people live, and it doesn't look like my home, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes things are different, and so I have a bit of perspective that I wouldn't otherwise have. But if I just stayed within my community, within my racialized community, my religious community, which I could, right? There's people within my community who are literally like family members who are born and are raised in the community, speak the language, go to the religious school, don't even come out of that bubble until they go into like post-secondary education, if they do that, right? So it's not just white people that can live in a bubble. My people can live in a bubble too, absolutely. But at what point do you go, okay, but I live in a society where there's a lot of people that don't look like me, don't live like me. At what point do you go, well, even though I don't know what that's like, maybe I can just listen and hear? And so going back to what I said, protesting all kinds of things for a long, long time. Racism, sexism, like fighting has been part of, like, can we just get a piece of the pie? Can we just have a safe place to rest our heads? Can we have some food in our stomachs? People have been fighting for these basic things forever. So yes, you have a bit of naivety. We all do. We're all trying to figure out, wait, everyone has different lived experiences. I'll give you that. But that's where I go back to, at this point, enough of that I didn't know, because enough people have shed their blood, have lost their lives, have killed, trodden on, hung, lynched, like you name it. Enough people that at this point, it's not enough to say, I didn't know. You just have to believe. You just have to believe and be willing to listen and trust that people are living different lives in this same time, same space.
What is it at our core that you think we as humans are so afraid of?
Sorry, you got to say that again. I missed it.
My question was, what do you think it is at our core that we human beings are so afraid of? To make this such a continuing cycle and prevalent issue to chase. What's the fear? What are we so afraid of?
I don't want you to ask me that question. Because what I know to be true is a fear of disappearing. There's a fear that when we have this need to hang on to our cultural identity, our racial identity, our people, if you will, as an example, within my culture, it is absolutely frowned upon to marry outside of the culture. You would, you marry within, you stick to the same religion and the same people, and it's all to protect, right? It's to protect wealth, it's to protect honor, family, all that kind of stuff. Well, it's not that different, how white people have lived for many years as well, in the very same way. So for my understanding, it is this fear of losing our identities that gets us so jacked up. It's the fear of diluting, of losing our racial identity. But it's also backwards, because race is a social construct for those who haven't got their head around that. Meaning, it is the identity of race has been handed to people by white people. So here you are classified as this, you're classified as that, you're classified as this. But in doing so, they forgot to mention that by racializing you, that's why we use the word racialize, because it's something that's done to us. By racializing you, I'm actually identifying myself as white. Because you can't call somebody Black and South Asian and all the different, you can't do that without also at the same time simultaneously saying, so by rights, if I say all of that about you, that makes me white. So there's been a misstep, because we've forgotten that by calling and identifying all these different racial identities, you're also calling out that your race is different and is superior. And so there's a fear of losing that, I think, is what happened. I mean, it's why there's a caste system in certain countries. It's why there was arranged marriages in many countries across the world, around the globe. It's all to sort of protect our people, right? So the core of it is the fear of losing something. But what is that? Why does it matter? Why is it so important? This whole system, racism is a system. It supports things.
Yeah, we're clinging to these false identities. For what end, I don't know, to give ourselves the illusion of some element of control. And we could really dive deep into that. One of the things that that I've become interested in over the last few months is just feeling more connected, not even just to other people, but just to understand what life is and what it means, and how fundamentally arrogant, maybe ignorant, a lot of us human beings are, that we consider ourselves a life, like a human is a life, as opposed to it just being life. The tree is life, the air is life, a Black person is life, a white person is life, a sea otter is life, the water is life. But that any sense of separation, as soon as we start to categorize or identify things as one or the other, good or bad, well, now we're already rolling down that slippery slope. And I have that on my mind while I'm listening to you, Rumina, about just seeing how tightly woven these ideas of identity, culture, community, tradition, system, territory, like it's an interesting thing to unravel, to just be able to get us all to look each other in the eye and respect each other's experience, and try to step forward as proactively as we can to try to create and nurture as good an experience as we can for all of us. I mean, are there not sometimes when you go into an organization where at the end of the day you want to pull your hair out and throw your hands up, that we just can't even be so fundamentally basic as to be decent to each other and see we're all connected? I mean, what's that like?
If I'm honest with you, Kevin, we don't get past go, because it's evident. I know, right? So I've been in meetings where, people have felt like it is important for me to know how they feel about Black Lives Matter, or how they feel about, Trump and, racism, and a very outwardly racist in their dialogue with me. And so but it stops there. I have people who will say, we're trying to get some data, we're trying to gain some race-based data on our, and we want to figure out who our board members are. And so we're going to do a questionnaire, and we're thinking we're going to ask, what's your sexual orientation? So should we put homosexual? And then they would check it off. It's horrible. I'm like, no, I can't work with you, but please, before you put that out, don't ask that question. It's nothing to do with what you like. People are very misguided. And so from no, I don't go into those places. That's what I'm saying. I'm over that. I'm over trying to force it down to make fit. I'm all about, are you curious? Do you want to know more? Do you genuinely want to be better? Then I can help you. I can't help those. So I do encounter that. And I have a very thick skin in terms of, because I genuinely believe people, there's no harm in their intent. I understand that. And people, parrot things that they hear, that they understand. based on their limited scope of knowledge of the world. And I give them that. I'm not here to take that away. But when you're ready, and if you're ready, I'm here to show you that it's actually not the way that you see it, and that there's lived experiences all around us that could tell you that your narrative is not the real world for most people. So I don't do work with people like that. There's go for it. No, that's not for me. I'm over that.
You've mentioned a couple of times the term about being a racist, anti-racist, and you've given a couple of examples, and I wonder if we could unpack that a little bit. You mentioned a name there in your last response that rhymes with dumb, that has been... The reason why I bring that up is I did a video a little while ago on my TikTok account. This was a few months ago. And it was just a little 15, 20-second thing that was actually a line borrowed from Abraham Hicks, who I follow, where they say, if you see a flaw in someone else, it's not their flaw. You're seeing a reflection of something inside yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see it. You're choosing to focus on something that you're identifying with in someone else, meaning that you've got some stuff of your own to clean up. And the point that I was trying to get across was of acknowledging and taking personal responsibility for what we see in others, good and maybe not as good, as a reflection of ourselves. And I got attacked for that more than any other video I've ever done. And I thought it was really interesting. But I've got that on my mind with your thought about being the racist, anti-racist, because, I see things from Trump or from others that I'll catch myself with really not constructive thoughts. And I'll wonder where that comes from and what I am to do with them. Because if I start pouring negative thoughts and negative energy and judgmental energy toward anyone, no matter how heinous I, from my set of perspective, may consider it to be, I don't really feel like I'm contributing anything proactive in terms of solving this. I'm going to stop myself here because I feel like I'm flying around the room, but I gather you know what I'm trying to get at, and getting back to this racist, anti-racist, and what I would call accountability and just taking a personal responsibility. How would you unpack that? And did anything that I just shared make any sense to you at all into that context?
Yes and no. Yes. I mean, what's happening in the States, let's just go a little bit broader, is very, I mean, obviously it's very polarizing, and it is divisive, but it is also very telling of the state of affairs, right? And I actually don't know that it would be, if we had that clear cut of a line here, if we had somebody in power that was that divisive and that clear, like, which side of the line are you on? I'm very confident that Canadians would stand on one side or the other very clearly and very quickly. We just have to look at what's happening in Nova Scotia to know, with the Micmac fisher, with the lobster fishermen. You're either here or you're there. And so what's happening there is symbolic of what's always, again, it's not new. It just has a new face. It's tinged a different color. Yeah, he's a puppet, if you will, in terms of a bigger picture, right? Like, he's just one symptom of a much larger problem, but he's created the divide that was always there and allowed people to kind of go, are you with or are you without? Same with the coronavirus, right? The same thing. We have people who are like, it's a hoax or it's not. Like, you're here or you're here. You're a mask or you're unmasked. Like, everyone is finding these lines to just split, right? Have a different history than the States. We have a similar history, right? We have many differences and many similarities, but we both nations and many others are needing to heal at this point and really sort of reconcile what's happening. So yeah, the next few days are going to be very interesting and very impactful on us. Because either way, I don't think it matters. I think people are recognizing it's not really going to matter who wins the election. Whatever the fallout is going to look very, very similar. I think that's the scary part for me.
Let's change the narrative a little bit. Tell me about what is particularly rewarding about what you do.
I have some really cool conversations. I am, you talk about the bubble that I recognize I've been in as a social worker. I'm around a lot of people that care about people. I'm around a lot of people that are very compassionate. But I also have encountered, through the families that I've worked with, a lot of anger and a lot of resistance and a lot of upset. So I've had these two extreme kind of experiences. But what I'm really excited and what I really love right now is this whole world of people that I hoped existed but didn't actually know that they did for sure, because I hadn't come across them in my life. And that is these people who are our age and older, who have rebel rap for a long time, but in their leadership and in their sort of following suit, as we all have, right? Like sort of get a job, get successful, but just following that sort of linear path that everyone's been told to follow, and they're in these leadership positions. I'm now finding there's people that are there that are like, when I go out, I act a little bit more conservative. I'm actually a pretty cool cat at home, right? Like the code switching that's happening, I'm realizing that there's some really cool people that understand and recognize the system for what it is. And so the moments that I live for right now are where I can affect change, can actually influence other people, can actually be the voice for those who are voiceless because of their position and their power. I know I take my leadership positions and my power and my privilege as someone who is able to do this work, who has been able to lose her job for doing this kind of work. And, I have the privilege to fall back on resources because of who I am. Other people don't have that. So I'm loving tapping into the people that are like, well, I want to do something differently, and I'm firing up people to sort of use their voice and understand their own stuff so that they can hack it for others and actually watch that ripple effect. It's this thing I used to do as a leader in my child welfare days, in terms of that ripple effect of I'm gonna model for you how we have difficult conversations, and then you're gonna go do that with families, because that's your frontline piece, and I'm this is my piece with you. So I'm looking so forward to the work that I'm doing with people that are in positions of power, that are like, wait, we can affect change with this power. We can actually make a difference and be the difference. Tell me more. How do I do this? Because that ripple effect, that where I see changes being implemented or shifting happening, or even just believing that there is a different way to do things, that is ridiculously exciting for me, because that's what it's always been about for me, is where are the conduits for change? Where are you? Come, let's do this, because any change is better than no change, right? And as you said, it's a tipping point. So I'm all about it right now. Let's just keep going, because there's no stopping at this point. There's too many. How many lives do we have to watch? Like enough. So it's a time. I think that there is momentum building, and things are going to shift.
What's the best way, Rumina, for people to either continue this conversation or to initiate one for themselves, whether that's individually or maybe through their organization? How should or could they reach out to you?
Well, I can be reached. I have a website. It's ruminamorris.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. It's a fun place for me to be. Supporters there. And I can be emailed at ruminamorris.com.
It's a fascinating topic. I feel like we've barely even scratched the surface of it. And hopefully you'll accept an invitation to come back and maybe take some specific lanes and dive into them. I did prepare some notes of some things, just even from your website, that I wanted to ask you about this, that, or the other. So let's do it again sometime. And I look forward to when we get to share the stage together at ECMO Mondays London, or some other event. Who knows when that might be. But I also want to really applaud you for the work that you're doing. Absolutely. Yeah. And it takes a lot of guts, I think, and character to step forward and to lead and to invite the kinds of fundamental conversations that need to happen that you are doing, and God bless you for doing it. And you've given me a
Thank
lot to
you.
think about, and anyone who comes across this conversation, I know will say the same. So hopefully the first of many between us. But thank you so much for this time, Rumina. It's a pleasure to get to know you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Have a good night.
My pleasure. That's Rumina Morris. You can reach her, as she said, at ruminamorris.com. This is episode number 111 of Journeys with the No Schedule Man. We will have the audio up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music within a day or so of this broadcast that's being recorded, as we're on Facebook and YouTube at the moment. And you can subscribe and follow us for free on any of those platforms. I want to say thank you quickly to our friends at Mulligan Realty Group for their support of the podcast, the kind of realtor that you deserve. Visit them at mulliganrealtygroup.com. Provincial Glass and Mirror, right here in London, Ontario, Canada. Boy, they've been doing yeoman's work, especially through the course of the pandemic, in helping a lot of workplaces with just making sure that they're as safe as they can be, and taking care of the necessary renovations. They've been on call right from the start of the lockdown, and you can find out more about Brett and the team at Provincial Glass and Mirror at provincialglass.com. And My Real Success Pass, which is my online coaching and collaboration service. If you'd like to have a group of heart-centered entrepreneurs supporting you on your journey and the opportunity to interact and collaborate on a regular basis, have a look at that. You can find out more at myrealsuccess.ca. My name is Kevin Bulmer. This is Journeys with the No Schedule Man. And on behalf of Rumina Morris, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day and a great